Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, my goodness, guys, entitled Karens are getting taught lessons left and right. I hope you enjoy the stories. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So the whole story begins with a beauty pageant for little girls, around 2 to 6 years old. Now, this wasn't one of the big professional shows like Honey Boo Boo. It was on a small village fair, which raised money for the volunteer firefighters of our small village. There were no prizes as such, but major bragging rights for a whole year. So you can imagine that some moms and grandmas took this thing way too seriously. There were two categories, one that was 2 to 4 years old and another 5 to 6 years old. All they had to do was walk the runway up and down one time in their cutest dresses. So with that said, picture the scene. A tent for about 1,000 people, maybe a third filled with moms, grandmas, and everybody who couldn't run away fast enough. Of course, the moms who had kids in the pageant were sitting front row center. The older kids had already had their turn, and it was time for the young kids. Out on stage comes this cute little 3-year-old in a cute white dress, styled to the nines with makeup and stuff. All that kid was supposed to do was walk from one side of the stage to the other and back again. That's it. But in the middle, there were some beautiful flower arrangements, so the kid walks to the middle, sees the flowers, and then starts smelling them playfully and whatnot, completely unaware of the rest of the world. It was so cute, and everyone was just in awe. Then, suddenly, one of the grandmas, the Karen of the story, flips her lid, and she shouts, "What are you doing? Get off the damn stage. You are trying to steal the show. That is so unfair." It's at this point, Karen then storms the stage. She grabs the kid by the arm aggressively and literally drags the kid off the stage. The kid, of course, instantly starts screaming and crying for her mom, and that was a big mistake for Grandma Karen. Because doing that, she got the attention of Mama Bear. Mama Bear storms after Karen, grabs her by the hair, pulls her around, and then screams, "Let my daughter go." In her shock, she did let go for a moment, and Mama Bear sees her moment for revenge has come. She hits Karen square in the face, twice, with a right hook that could make Muhammad Ali jealous. Grandma Karen, who's maybe 55 years old, screeches, and she wants to hit her back, but in that moment, the firefighters intervene, and they drag them apart. Now, this could have been the end of the show, but of course, Grandma Karen keeps insisting on getting the cops involved to jail the Mama Bear who attacked her so violently. So they take to one side of the tent and the other to the other side, and they wait for cops to arrive. Well, the police arrive and they start interviewing a few people to get an idea of what exactly happened. And then they interview Grandma, and she insists on pressing charges. The cop then asks if she's sure and tries to get her to let things go, but she keeps screeching and insisting, so he warns her that if she insists, he will prosecute both of them to the full extent of the law. Karen, of course, says yes. So with that, the cop maliciously complies, and he tells Karen to turn around. Karen's then arrested for kidnapping of a minor. Suddenly, it dawns on her that she could really be in trouble here, and she starts to backpedal. But the cop told her that she's had more than enough chances to let things go, but she wouldn't, because she wanted to get the mother in trouble for defending her kid from a crazy lady. Of course, Grandma Karen could not accept that, especially after telling the cop no. She tries to attack the cop. She then got tased by his partner. Half a year later, she got in front of a judge. She got 2 years probation, plus 1,000 hours of social work. And you want to know what the mom got? The mom got a cake from all the neighbors who hated that Grandma Karen, especially after what she had done there. Any charges were dropped due to her simply defending her daughter against a crazy, potentially dangerous kidnapper. There was a short argument if she had the right to deck her like that, after Grandma had let go of the kid, but her lawyer simply argued that she had no way of knowing if the danger was truly over, or if she had let the kid go to attack Mama Bear. so trying to knock her out with her fist was fully justified. What an awesome ending to that one, guys, and nothing is more satisfying than justice served to smug Karens. And honestly, nothing makes me happier than when Karens are convinced the other person's at fault, then demands for cops to get involved, all to have it backfire so hard on them. And seriously, did she not realize that the mother attacked her because she grabbed her child and tried to run off the stage with her? Honestly, in that situation, I'd say 2 hits to the face. That mama bear let Karen off easy because, oh boy, we all know people out there that would go way beyond just 2 hits to the face, right? With that said, some people do take those pageant shows a little bit too seriously. And hopefully Grandma Karen learned a lesson that day. This is a long one. So my partner Carl and I were friends at first, and when he lost his house due to bankruptcy, he came to live with me. He had no job, lived in poverty, and he was on disability pension, of which he gave his ex half for 14 years since his wife left. In contrast, I owned my own house, had a successful business, and I was pretty independent. He was very handy around the house, and he loved puttering, talking with the neighbors, and he had a great sense of humor. He was clean and very easy to live with. We were together for 10 years. We treated each other very well, but he had no rights to anything I owned and vice versa. I stayed away from his family drama as best as I could. Carl had 2 adult kids, Margot, who's 28, and Todd, 35. The kids never visited their father, ever, and when he called them, they rarely picked up or returned his calls. And if they did pick up, they brushed him off or dismissed him entirely. I really felt bad for him, but what could I do? They were like that for years before I met him. They were rude and nasty people, but he loved them, and he couldn't understand why they didn't have time to talk to him. Carl suddenly died one evening at 58. He had been in poor health, and finally, his heart just gave out. Not 12 hours after he died, his one daughter Margot called to ask if he had any life insurance payouts. For a nanosecond, I thought she was actually concerned about my finances handling the burial. But no, she told me that according to their mother's separation agreement, he was supposed to keep life insurance on himself and that she and Todd were the beneficiaries. I guess he never told her that once she turned 18, he had canceled his life insurance because he was on disability and couldn't afford it. Later that same day, Margot called and asked if he had a will. She told me that she had already been to a lawyer, and this was after the day he died, and that because she suspected Carl didn't have a will, she would be his next of kin, and she would get everything. She then told me that she would be taking over the burial arrangements, and she was the beneficiary of all of his stuff in my house, including his car, which was a used car but still newer than hers. I was pretty upset by the timing of all of this, and I couldn't believe that they could be this mean and cruel so soon after he died. He was their dad, and he loved them so much. She then told me that she would be doing a walkthrough in my house to be sure I didn't miss anything of his. And this is where I said, no, you won't. Margot then got really pissed about my refusal to let her in the house to take the car the same day, and she conveniently forgot to tell me where they were having the funeral. She didn't put it in the paper, and she only told special people where it was. I found out later it was 3 towns away, but she did let me know repeatedly that they wanted the car and all of his stuff out of my house. But here's the thing. I knew that once she came to take the car, she wouldn't be back to get the rest of his stuff, which she knew was nothing of any value. I would then be left to get rid of a monumental amount of stuff at my own expense. So cue the malicious compliance. Now, a dear thing about Carl is he's a hoarder, and I mean that in the true sense of the word. If something was broken, useless, outdated, or worn out, he would keep it. So the guy had 4 old-style TVs, 6 giant mechanics toolboxes, 8 computers, 2 dead barbecues, an industrial drill press that he was gonna fix, a bandsaw he found in the dump, 6 stereo components, plus 198 boxes, and yes, I counted, of metal parts from odd machines, trucks, cars, bulldozers, and buses that he salvaged and collected over the years. And all this stuff was in the garage, which he thought of as his man cave. 198 very heavy boxes. I guess they were packed quite full. Plus the pride of his collection, a 60-year-old 5-ton metal lathe that Noah used to construct the Ark. So with that, here was my plan. I parked the car at the very back of my 2-car garage and then shoved all the boxes of stuff right in front of it, so that it was impossible to remove the car without taking everything out in front of it, including the metal lathe. It took 2 weeks and a lot of effort, but the garage was packed to the roof. I even took a picture of the garage with the doors open. Margot and Todd soon started screaming to their lawyer that I wasn't cooperating in regards to the car. I then responded that I needed to see a legal document that the car was in fact legally theirs, registered in their name, and properly insured in case they drove away. I also said that I needed to have the rest of the stuff taken away. Plus, I had just had my driveway paved, so they had to have proper movers to come get this stuff, not just a couple of yahoos in pickup trucks that would damage the new driveway. They said they would, after they got the car. Their lawyer screamed that I was stalling and refusing to give up the car. He even went as far as to accuse me of selling the car and wanted cops coming to my place. I sent the picture I'd taken of the garage to my lawyer, proving I still had the car. My lawyer said, "Where is it?" I said, "You can barely see the roof, but it's there behind the boxes." And the guy got a good laugh out of that. Margot and Todd had to hire a moving and storage company to come collect Carl's precious stuff. The metal lathe took 4 men and a special small towing motor machine thing to take it away. It took all day for them to empty that garage. I asked where they were taking it, and they said to a storage unit. The head mover did say something to the effect that there was no way that this was gonna fit in the one storage unit they rented. And I thought to myself, oh well. So in the end, the cost of the movers was $14,000. I was curious, so I asked the moving guys. And who knows what the storage units cost and for how long they rented them. Perhaps they recouped some of the money spent from selling scrap metal. Oh, right, I almost forgot. They also had to pay for his funeral. It turns out that I did have an insurance policy on him that I paid for, and I had planned to use it for his burial. But since I wasn't told where the funeral was, I used the money to pay off my mortgage. It would have cost them absolutely nothing to be nice to the woman that looked after their dad for 10 years. And this is what they get. Like, guys, it's always so sad when you hear stories like this, where family members appear out of nowhere after years, making outrageous demands like that. I'm just so glad that OP decided to be petty and made those kids take everything instead of that one single car they wanted. What a wonderful malicious compliance. Absolutely brilliant, OP. So this isn't my story, but it's my friend Adam's. Adam is a retired police officer, and this takes place back in the 90s, when Adam was a beat cop, maybe a year or 2 into his service. At the time the story takes place, a firebug had targeted several businesses over the course of a 3-month period. The fires were put out, but they were getting bigger and bigger, causing thousands of dollars in damages. Everyone was on edge, and the police were patrolling the area every night to try to catch Mr. Firebug. On this particular night, in the middle of February, Adam and his partner Rick drew the short stick, and thus they were assigned to patrol part of the area. While on patrol, he notices a classic Mercedes-Benz pulling up to a house, and a familiar lady dressed in a thick fur coat steps out. He groans. It's the wife of a local business owner that every officer in the town has had the displeasure to ticket for various parking and traffic violations. Now, it would have been fine if she was a nice lady or something, but no. Her 3 default sentences were, "Don't you know who I am? Where's your manager? And I'll have your job." Seriously, she was a Karen before Karens were even a thing. So Rick points out to Adam that Karen had parked right by the fire hydrant, par for the course. Adam then gets ready and he steps out of the squad car. He approaches and says, "Good evening, Mrs. Karen." At that she says, "What are you doing here?" Adam guessed that's the Karen's version of the word hello. Adam tells her, "I'm working beat. Do you know you parked right next to a fire hydrant?" Karen replies, "So?" He then says, "I'm suggesting you move it before I write you a ticket. I'm not in the mood for extra paperwork tonight." At that, Karen says, "Listen, you need to leave my car alone or I'll have your job." With that, Karen storms off to the house. She goes inside and slams the door. Adam thought, "If you say so." He then proceeds to check the outside of the car for any more violations and wishing that being a bitch was a federal offense. As he's putting the ticket under the windshield wiper, the call that everyone's been dreading comes on the radio. A fire alarm has been triggered, and the address was right across the street. Adam looks over at the building, and he can see a faint orange glow in the windows on the second floor. He reports the glow. He and Rick get ready, just in case Mr. Firebug decides to cross their path. Several other officers arrive, and they set a perimeter around the building as the glow gets brighter and brighter. Unfortunately, by the time the fire department gets there, flashover happens, and all the windows on the second floor get blown out. It was so hot that Adam felt sweat form on his face. It's at this point the fire department needs to get the hoses set up, but Karen's car is in the way. Using safety hammers, they break the windows and then run the hoses through, getting everything set up in record time. And during all the chaos, Karen comes out and she sounds like a banshee that had swallowed an air raid siren. The woman runs over and she tries unhooking the hose from the hydrant. She screams, "What are you doing? My car is ruined!" It actually took 2 officers to restrain her and bark at her to go back inside, to let everyone do their jobs. The woman actually listened and she returned inside. Adam then spent the rest of his shift helping with the fire and investigation. It was close to dawn when he returned to the station to finish up. All he wanted to do was go home and crawl into bed. And that's when his supervisor calls Rick and him over and reports that Karen reported several $1,000s worth of damage. Not only had her windows been broken, but the water had gotten in and froze because it was, again, the middle of February. The supervisor asked them what happened and they reported everything. The supervisor then shook her head, laughed, and she said, "Well, you had nothing to do with the car getting damaged, so I consider this case closed." A few weeks later, they caught the firebug. It was a different business owner who was trying to commit insurance fraud. He figured if several other buildings caught fire, nobody would think he was responsible for burning down his own business. Unfortunately, Karen never did seem to learn her lesson, so she was back racking up tickets and being a thorn in the police's side. She did have to pay for the damages and the ticket Adam gave her, but being a rude, rich woman, again, she never did learn. You know, being that rich and entitled, people see stuff like that as little nuisances more than anything. Like, it is nice to hear that she got to see what happens when she deliberately parks by a fire hydrant. But like Opie said, when she's got that much money, lessons are not learned. Like, I remember reading a post a long time ago where Opie used to date this ultra-rich guy who literally parked anywhere he wanted, just like this Karen. And when Opie asked him why he did that, the guy would just go, "Meh, when you've got this much money, you just pay to be able to do stuff. Like, parking in a handicap spot cost me $300. Driving over the speed limit cost me blah blah blah." You get the point. Like, it must be nice to be that rich, right? With that said, guys, I can't think of anything more entitled than someone trying to remove the hose from a fire hydrant when the place across the street is on fire. So this happened when I, a female, 20 at the time, was a junior in college. So here's some context. I had taken a weekend trip to Florida with a friend of mine to visit her brother to go to Universal Studios, which was awesome. We had an amazing trip, and we were on the plane about to head home. This was only my second ever time with air travel. We didn't have much money when I was growing up, so vacations were not a regular thing, and the ones we did take were low-key. So there I was, just excited to be flying in my coach seat, waiting to take off. And we just kept waiting. It then became clear that there was a problem with the plane when the flight attendants started calling various passengers to exit, to be placed on different flights, so they would make their necessary connections. Eventually, after 40 minutes, it was my friend and I, plus around 6 other people. And then it was our turn to leave the plane. We were sort of near the end of the group, tromping back out to the waiting area. One couple, probably in their mid-50s, storms up ahead of us. By the time my friend and I emerged from the gate entrance, the rude husband was berating the pair of flight attendants, who to their credit remained poised and calm. They tried to reassure him, but he was talking over them. He was screaming, "This is unacceptable. You'd better get me the same seats we had on that flight." The guy had the first row in coach, the one with no seats in front of him, therefore with extra legroom. By then, the rest of us had gathered around, and the flight attendants began addressing the whole group, offering reassurances, filling us in that there was a problem with the plane, which made me very glad for the change, despite the inconvenience. The rude husband was going off through all this, and when the attendants left to make arrangements for us all, he and his wife just sat there, and he continued his commentary to his poor wife. How this is unacceptable, how dare they, they'd better have the same seats, so on and so on. Shortly, the attendants returned, and the man practically rushes them and says, "I demand you make this right." The one attendant smiles and says, "You guys are all set, sir." She then smiled at him specifically and said, "I'm very happy to tell you that we have a flight leaving shortly, and we were able to give you and your wife the exact same seats as you booked on the previous flight." The rude husband tells her, "I sure hope so. That's the least you can do. This is unacceptable." And with that, he huffily returns to his seat. Meanwhile, the rest of us are just waiting. The flight attendant then turns to us and she says, "I'm happy to let everyone else know that you'll all be flying first class with us today." With that, the rude husband was furious. The guy immediately jumped up to demand why they weren't flying first class, while the rest of us just sat there in a state of stunned glee. The attendant then informed the man that she had given him his request, that he yelled at her saying he wanted the exact same seats he had before. After she said that, she left. She didn't stick around for more abuse. The wait wasn't long, and soon my friend and I boarded the plane and we took our first class seats. As a poor air travel newbie, it was like some fantasy land. There were huge seats, hot washcloths, and even though we were underage and we couldn't partake of the free cocktail, we did get to choose from a basket of distinctive Pepperidge Farm cookies. And the food was absolutely delicious. Meanwhile, the rude husband is irate. My friend and I were the last row of first class, which only had around 8 seats, and we could hear the guy huffing and puffing to the coach attendants, going off on how stupid kids don't deserve first class, and how he should have gotten them because they're older and should be respected, not some kids. Someone else who was in first, not from the original plane, caught on, and they were quite tickled with the man's displeasure. And then the best part of all happened. The flight attendant in our section overheard the rude man's tirade, with language specifically directed at my friend and I. The guy was saying stuff like, "Who do those effing kids think they are?" The flight attendant then shook his head and he addressed my friend and I. He said, "I'm sorry about that. Let me take care of this for you." He then closed the curtain to the coach cabin. The rude husband then realized what was happening, which makes it even better. I got one last look at his red, irate face before he was gone forever. It was glorious. Oh my goodness, I would be laughing so hard if I were in OP's shoes, because people like that jerk deserve absolutely nothing. And seriously, it makes it even better that OP got to experience what it's like flying first class and to get pampered on her second ever flight. And this is exactly why you treat others with respect. Like, if that man kept his mouth shut, he might have gotten first class as well. But no, being that angry, upset, demanding this and that, and how they'd better give him the exact same seats with legroom, the guy totally got what he deserved, which is, again, not first class. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, why not subscribe so you don't miss these crazy stories? And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's on our /entitled people episode, where a psycho Karen tries to break into someone's house, and obviously it doesn't go as well as she planned. Guys, go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.